bawling and squalling. I said, baby, don't cry. Please don't cry. Baby, don't cry. I didn't know wives cried. I never had a wife before. I mean, it was terrible. I mean, it was just terrible. But then God gave me the flashback of we'd heard about this church. So we started driving to it one Sunday morning. We drove and we drove and we drove. You know something? We never found that church. It got to be 11 o'clock, 11:15, almost 11:30. We hadn't even found the church. I said, baby, we better stop in this church we come to. We're going to miss church today. And up the road a little ways, a little sign by the road said Assembly of God. So I said, well, that's what we are. We just go there. We turn down this little dirt street, you know, maybe in fact it was dirt and gravel, and we get to this little church and open the car door for my wife, and I can hear this having church in that church. We get to the door, open the door for my wife, and we walk in, and she turns blue and pink and red and purple, because we done walked in an all-black church. All black church, but they was having church. They had a fellow on the grand piano, he was just a bouncing all over, just a bouncing. Had a fellow on the Hammond organ, he was slide from one side to the other. They had a drummer, the drummer, Brother Larry, I wish you could see him. He was so excited, he was beating on the floor. I mean, he was banging on the floor. He was so excited. My wife, she's changing colors, you know, and I look at her and I said, baby, I'm going to go get my horn. And I went out there and got my saxophone, and I ran back in that church, and I teach those black folks one step, and they teach me two. You talk about church, we had church. We had church. And along about 2:30 that afternoon, 2:30, they turned the service to the preacher. When black folks have church, they have church. I mean, they have church. Now, my wife and I hadn't heard any next year, didn't know anybody, so we kind of sit off there to the side. By that time, the biggest black dude I've ever seen started preaching. I'm going to tell you something. Oh, my Lord. He got up there. Next thing I knew, he got in there pretty close to me and stopped and says, come in. I didn't know where to get up and go there or get up and run. But I got up and went to him. He raised one hand like this, reached out and touched me right here. And he began to prophesy. He said, I can see that you've been discouraged. I can see that you've felt alone. He said, but God would have you know this day that he ain't forgotten you. That he ain't forgotten you. Oh, hallelujah. And church, the greatest thing I can tell you tonight is he ain't forgotten you. Oh, he ain't forgotten you. Oh, you may not believe this, but I promise God this is the truth. That night as I lay in the wreckage of the plane, I disappeared from radar. Hundreds of people were looking for me. They couldn't find me. But as I lay in the wreckage of that plane, all of a sudden I heard someone coming through those woods. And the next thing I knew, it was that same big old black preacher. That same big old black preacher. You say, my God, preacher, how did he get there? All I can tell you is God picked him up in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and translated him and set him down in that swamp there in Panama City, Florida. All of a sudden, he reached out in that wreckage and touched me right here on the head. And you know what he said? He said, he ain't forgotten you. He ain't forgotten you. Somebody needs to hear me tonight. I don't care what you've been going through. God ain't forgotten you. I don't care how forsaken you seem to be. He ain't forgotten you. I don't care how many needs you have tonight. He ain't forgotten you. Oh, he ain't forgotten you. God gave me the flashback how that black preacher even prophesied that Sunday how God was going to open doors for the ministry. When it looked like our ministry had been stopped in Oklahoma, you know what after that black preacher prophesied? I ended up preaching 320-something times that first year. 330-something times the next year. 340-something times the next year. And every year from that year till I had the plane crash, almost 400 and more services every year. You know why? There's no stopping God. You know why? The Lord can do it again. Somebody needs to hear me. I said, the Lord can do it. I said, the Lord can do it again.